Hello, rock stars, and welcome to another episode of Short Stories with S.E. Rocks. On this episode, I will be continuing my Tony Schiavone Butts in Seats, the Tony Schiavone story read, but I will be starting at Chapter 1. So let's begin, shall we? Chapter 1, How Uncle John Got Me to Love Professional Wrestling. I was born in 1957 and grew up in Craigsville, Virginia, and I first discovered professional wrestling as a sophomore in high school, where I attended the nearby Buffalo Gap High School. There were only about 146 students in my graduating class. It was a small town, so, as you can imagine, there wasn't ever a lot to do. Like a lot of kids my age, I worked on the weekends. I was a bagger at Parker's IGA, a local grocery store. Mr. Parker, my boss, was a close friend of my family. There weren't many nice things about living in such a small town, but one of them was that everything was close to everything else. As such, I could tell my boss I was going to walk home for lunch. But in truth, I was going to visit my Aunt Frances and Uncle John so I could watch professional wrestling. Uncle John lived in Florida for a while where he watched professional wrestling. By the time he moved back to Virginia, we started watching wrestling together. He was a huge fan of wrestling heroes like Jack Briscoe. That Jack Briscoe, he takes no guff from anybody. He's a man's man. I wish he was wrestling here for Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling too. Back in those days, professional wrestling promotions were divided up into different territories. Since we were in Virginia, we got Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, also known as Jim Crockett Promotions, based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, on our local television stations. Kayfabe, the belief the storylines in wrestling were real-life scenarios rather than scripted, was very much alive in those days, and especially so with Uncle John. I continued to watch professional wrestling every weekend, often with Uncle John, until I graduated high school, and started attending James Madison University in Harrisonburg, Virginia, which was about an hour away from Craigsville. I was majoring in what was then called radio, TV, film, with the goal to be a baseball announcer. One day, while on campus, I saw that Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling would be coming to the Harrisonburg High School gym. Back in those days, high schools would often bring in pro wrestling events to help fund the athletic departments. My dad had passed away a few years earlier, but I was still close with my mom's side of the family, including Uncle John, of course, so I had a plan. The morning tickets were on sale. I was the first one at the Harrisonburg High School's athletic director's office to get tickets. "I want to buy some wrestling tickets." "How many you want?" "I want 15 tickets." 15 tickets? This was the first live professional wrestling event I would ever attend, so I bought my family the whole front row. The main event was a tag team match with the heel team, the bad guys, of Ric Flair and Greg Valentine against the baby faces, the good guys, Wahoo McDaniel and Johnny Weaver. Before long, the action spilled out of the ring onto Uncle John's side, with Flair and Valentine double-teaming Weaver. Things used to get pretty rowdy at live events in those days, and a guy jumped out of the crowd and started riding Valentine's back like a monkey. Valentine shrugged him right off, and then he and Flair, and then even Wahoo, jumped in and started teaching him a lesson. Suffice to say, he was really brave until that started to happen. He realized that he needed to get out of there. "Tony, look!" That's when Uncle John decided to get in on the action. "Go ahead and show me what you got. I knew you were a coward." The match ended soon after that, and Aunt Frances came over and asked me to help Uncle John out. "Can you help Uncle John? He's still all shaken up." "Come on, Uncle John, let me help you up." "I always told you that Greg Valentine is a no-good, rotten son of a..." Uncle John knew my goal was to become a baseball announcer, but he made another prediction for me that night. "Tony, I know you want to be a baseball announcer, but you would be a great wrestling announcer." "I know. I'm going to see you in wrestling one day." I fell in love with going to live wrestling events that night, and would even sneak out to see other live events, often when my mom was asleep. One time, I even got to take Uncle John to another one, and he enjoyed it, even if he didn't get a chance to physically accost any of the wrestlers that time. Regarding Uncle John, the good news is he was right in that I did become a wrestling announcer. The sad news is that he died in July of 1983, just a few months before I became a wrestling announcer that fall. I still think about him, and how he made my first ever live wrestling event so special, though. And that is it, my friends. Chapter 1 of the Tony Schiavone Butts and Seats, the Tony Schiavone story. Tune in next time for Chapter 2, and as always, keep rockin' and stay true.